Welcome back, everyone. And we are here for the second part of 7.6, Trade in the World Economy, with PSO 7A2, in which we're going to be talking about what are called neoliberal trade policies. So before we get to the different kinds of policies, we want to make sure we understand what neoliberalism means. So it is a range of pro-market, meaning like the people's desires to buy and sell things, being the market, pro-market and anti-government positions on the economy. They want to reduce government ownership and regulation. They want to promote privatization, meaning that private companies own stuff, and market-based solutions. With trade, it means promoting free trade and reducing government barriers and deregulating global financial markets and moving away from protectionism. Some of this is really positive, and some of this is really positive for wealthy people, but not for everybody else. And so there's kind of a balance when we're talking about neoliberalism when it comes to the economy that you guys want to kind of keep in mind that there are some pros and some also very large cons. Now, one of the biggest pieces of neoliberal trade policies has to do with what are called free trade agreements. And free trade agreements are treaties between countries that reduce tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods and services, and promote foreign investment. What this does is when you reduce a tariff, you're reducing the cost of something, because a tariff is a tax that's placed on an imported good. So the people who are producing the goods or selling them end up having to raise the price of something in order to offset the cost of the tariff. So a trade agreement, a free trade agreement, where that tariff is reduced or eliminated means that goods are more affordable between the trade partners. Now, these policies and approaches have led to a number of different things, including new organizations like the EU, the World Trade Organization, Mercosur, and OPEC. And just a quick rundown on each of those. EU, the European Union, among many other things, is a free trade agreement between its members because all tariffs and other non-tariff trade barriers have been removed, so that trade between members is basically like internal trade between, like, within a country. Because if I'm, in Spain and I want to trade with Denmark, I don't have to pay any tariff or tax, or there's no barrier between me importing and exporting between those two countries because they're part of the EU. Now, this is one of the reasons why there's been such a pushback in some parts of Britain against the Brexit, because they've removed themselves from the EU. So now those tariffs are in place again. And unfortunately for non-EU members, sometimes those tariffs are really high. So that's been one of the reasons to push back against Brexit, which of course has already happened. Now, with the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, it's an international organization that regulates trade between 184 member states. It's part of the UN. It provides a framework for negotiating trade agreements and resolving trade disputes internationally. There's also been a lot of pushback against the WTO since the 90s that you guys will learn about in world history. Mercosur is a South American trade bloc that includes Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and it acts as a customs union. So a customs union is a free trade agreement among member states with a single common external policy for non-members. What this does is it encourages free trade at a regional scale and adopts protectionist measures against exports from competing non-members. So let's say that, like, I'm in Argentina and I produce a lot of beef, and I can sell that beef to Brazil and Paraguay and Uruguay without any taxes or tariffs on my goods. But if I want to, whatever I want to do in regards to other countries, everybody else has to agree. Like, we all have the same policy. So let's say that, a Texas beef guy is like, hey, I want to sell my beef to Argentina. That's going to be taxed, or, the tariff is going to be much higher because it's an attempt to protect the local, or the regional in this case, industry. Last one is OPEC. So OPEC is an international trade agreement designed to regulate the output of oil. It was founded in 1965 between Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela in order to regulate oil production and avoid trade competition between members. Nowadays, there's 13 member states, and they control about 44% of the world's oil production, and they influence global supply and the prices of oil, which we saw back in the 70s with the oil crisis, where OPEC basically decided to start charging more money for what they were producing, and it drove up gasoline prices, like skyrocketed gasoline prices here in the United States. And then back in, I want to say this was only like 3 years ago, OPEC's production changed. Like they were producing too much, and it led to an overload of the market. And so that's why gas prices were so low for so long a couple years ago, is because of OPEC not regulating the way that they maybe wanted to. Now, other consequences is that there are increased spatial connections between places, meaning that the world is becoming more and more interconnected, and there are connections between places that exist in different geographical parts of the world. It also develops trade relationships between different parts of the world and increases globalization because of the interconnection and cooperation between countries. And those agreements that are being developed are a type of globalization and also supranationalism that is, changing the way that we interact with the world. All right, that's going to take us to the third EK. So I'll be back with you shortly to pick up on our third part.